Hi everyone! It's me again, coming out of my cave just in time for Halloween season. I should stop disappearing for the rest of the year for once. Regardless, here's a brand new tutorial in case you wanted to become a high fashion alien for Halloween, but even if you didn't, I think there's a few techniques in this video that might help you with other SFX looks. Without further ado, let's get down to business. For this project I used this face cast I have of my face. There's a link in the description for a tutorial if you'd like to make one for yourself. I also used air drying clay, a couple of sculpting tools, sandpaper and a small box to prop my face cast. In order to make the cheekbones I take a piece of clay and stick it on the cheekbones of the face cast. Using my fingers I go around the piece of clay and roughly spread the edges on the face cast. After doing it for both cheeks I end up with something like this. I also sculpted some alien eyes, but later I decided to not use them, so I will skip this part for the rest of the video. Now that the clay has somewhat dried, I see that the edges are not blended very well into the cast, so I take a bit of water with my finger and wet the clay, which after a couple of seconds starts to soften. Using more pressure with my fingers and the sculpting tool, I smooth out the edges of the cheekbones and let it dry. When it's fully dry, I cut a piece of rough sandpaper and I use it to further smooth out the cheeks. Especially, the part where the clay ends and the face cast begins has to be as smooth as possible, so later the edges of the prosthetics will be seamless. At some point I noticed that the right cheek was smaller than the left, so I used some extra clay to add more volume, and I'm basically doing the same thing. I wanted to add some texture on the cheeks, and even though it's not visible in the final product, I won't skip this step. I wet the clay and with an old toothbrush I create small pores on the cheek. I also use the black stipple sponge. When I'm happy with how it looks, it's time to build a room. Yes, I'm building a room around the sculpt that I will later fill with plaster. I take bigger pieces of clay and using my mini rolling pin I create walls that are even in thickness, which I cut and place around the sculpt. It's quite hard to make the first one stand, but it's doable. I smooth the outside part with my fingers, and when I add another wall I mush them together by blending their outer and inner edges. I end up with something like this. I repeat, I didn't use the eyes in the final look, so if I remade it, the room would take up a smaller portion. These walls have to be blended together and each of them to the cast very well, because we don't want any plaster leaking out. With a thin brush I spread Vaseline on the inside so nothing will stick on it for good. It's necessary, especially in the crevices. When the walls have dried, which usually takes 24 hours, I mix water with plaster until I reach a thicker but not very thick consistency. I don't have a standard ratio, I just eyeball it, and when I'm satisfied with how it looks, I put it inside the walls. I shake the whole cast so the air that's been trapped gets out in the form of small bubbles. I leave it to dry. After about 24 hours, I take the walls off carefully as well as the new mold that has been created. I follow the exact same process with the other side of the face cast. I end up with two cheekbone molds that I have cleaned up of any clay remains with either my fingers or soft sandpaper. You don't want to go at it with sharp tools because it can be damaged very easily. To make the prosthetics, I used gelatin. There's a tutorial linked in the description for the recipe. It's very easy with simple ingredients. I don't have a microwave oven, so I use the coffee pot in very low heat to warm it up. I already had some pre-made blocks in the fridge, so I popped a few of them in the pot. I wait till it melts. Here it is halfway there. This particular recipe makes a slightly softer gelatin, so I added a smidge of powdered gelatin and stirred thoroughly. When it has reached the runny consistency, I pour some in the mold. Then very carefully I match the mold to the face cast and I shake it so gelatin goes wherever there's space for it to go. Yeah, I hope you get it. I let it harden for about an hour and take it off. Slowly and very carefully I take the prosthetic off the mold. I did the same thing quite a few times and I preferred the result when I used more gelatin in the mold, so for the rest of the tutorial I will use the prosthetic on my left hand, which is from another try. Now the edges aren't perfect. At some parts they look pretty decent, but in others, mainly the ones I cut with scissors below the eyes, they look pretty intense and I want to smooth them out before I stick them on my face. So I placed each prosthetic in its mold and with a pencil I draw small marks around the edges. Then I pour some liquid latex in a lid and with Q-tips drenched in it, I coat the mold within the marks I drew and just a bit outside of them in order to create new smoother edges. I know you can't see what I'm doing. 3 years and I still suck at camera positions. Anyway, after that I take the prosthetic and press it down in the mold. I make sure it fits all around and... of course it's not on camera. With a Q-tip in latex, I seal the edges on top of the prosthetic. Enough with the cheekbones for now, let's do the big head. So in order to make a bigger bald cap, I used the red head that I have for making bald caps, but with an added layer of clay on top. This one is from a previous try for a bigger bald cap, but now I wanted it to be even bigger, so I will show you how I did that. First, I wanted to make the old edges better in the front. I take some clay, roll it into a thin long sausage, then I make the sausage flat with my mini rolling pin and I place it right on top of the old edges. Then I smooth it out with my fingers, but mostly towards the upper side of the head. I do the same thing with the face sculpt, meaning I use a few drops of water on my fingers and I smooth out the clay. After that, I decided that I wanted a couple of bumps to appear on the head, as if it's differently shaped, like not a normal human head, but more of an alien-y shape, I guess. So I take a ball of clay, cut it in half, and then slowly shape it with my fingers in a more almond type of shape. I play around with them till I am satisfied with the shape and thickness. When I find the right position according to my instinct, I press the clay and spread the edges same way I did with the cheekbones. And I followed the exact same process with the clay as previously. When it's all dried out, I take a piece of rough sandpaper and go over the entire area covered in clay, and especially the parts that were recently added. I sand it till it's as smooth as it can be. I don't really care about the backside, so I leave it as it is. Now that I can't tell where the clay ends and the plastic begins, it's time to start coating. Before latex though, I coat the head with isopropyl myristate so the latex will be easier to peel off. When it's all nice and coated, I pour latex in a cup and with a white cosmetic sponge I start stippling it around the entire head. From here on, it's the same process with a regular bald cap, which I already have a tutorial on. If you click on the NOSFERATU video, you'll see it more thoroughly. I did about 20 layers of latex. Yes, 20. And you have to let each one dry before the next one, so this took about 3 days to make. It also ended up having small pimples in some places, but I didn't mind. I think it gives a sense of realism. I don't know. Anyhow, I dust a lot of powder all over and then slowly I start peeling it off with my fingers. And I powder every millimeter I peel off. You don't want the latex to stick to itself. I started with the back of the head and slowly made my way to the front. When it's completely off, I powder it one last time. For the ears, I did the same thing as the NOSFERATU tutorial. I mean, these looks are pretty similar. I basically used some ears from clay that I had molded the same size as mine. I coat them with isopropyl myristate and later with latex using Q-tips. I did about 3 layers with Q-tips and then 3 more with a cosmetic sponge and stippling motions because I wanted them to have more skin-like texture. Once they are dry, I powder them on the outside and peel them the same way I did the ball cap. The time has come for me to apply all of those things I made. I have already put on this fancy turtleneck because I was worried it wouldn't fit through my new head later. I brushed my hair and put on 2 wig caps. I wanted to block my brows in order to create a more alien looking face, so I blocked them. I coat them with glue, flatten them, and with a butter knife spread a layer of glue on top. In order for my alien head to work, I had to provide padding on the inside. For that I used cotton in thin rectangular pieces. One on the top of my head, one on the back, and one on each side. I put the ball cap on and tried to sort of move around the pieces underneath to make them fit the cap better. I also used 2 smaller but thicker pieces for the bumps. I cut the ball cap on the sides of my ears very carefully and I groom around the cut so it will fit better. I also cut a bit more on the sides of my neck. I take the prosthetic ears, fill the points with cotton and prop them on my real ears to make sure they fit right. I added another layer of glue to my brows because I never seemed to cover them fully. And it's time to start gluing stuff. I fold the front of the ball cap and spread some spirit gum on my forehead and the sides of my face. I wait a couple seconds, I tap the glue to make it tacky and then lay the ball cap on top. For the very fine edges that didn't stick, I use some more glue. The same way I stick the ball cap on the sides of my neck as well. With a white cosmetic sponge and liquid latex, I blend the edges of the ball cap on my face. I don't use much latex each time and I stipple it in very thin layers vertically in relation to the edges I want to blend. I did about 3 to 4 layers for the ball cap. Remember the prosthetics I made earlier? This is them now. The latex has dried, so I powder it and very carefully peel the prosthetic off the mold. A hack to see where to apply glue on my face is to hold the prosthetic where I want it and with the brush loaded in powder, I gently go around it. I end up with an outline on my face. I spread spirit gum on the prosthetic, then my face, I tap and I stick it. I blend it the same way I blended the ball cap. Around that time I stuck the ears on top of mine and used latex on Q-tips for the edges. Of course, I did the same for the other cheekbone. Now that it's drying, I block the color of my eyebrows using orange body paint and concealer. I powder every portion I have covered with latex to take away the shine and the stickiness. It's finally time to paint. I rip up a white cosmetic sponge on one side, I dip it into water and then white water activated body paint and I create the base of the alien color. I spread the color around using stippling motions again. It helps me give it a more textured look. With the same sponge I use a bit of black mixed with white for the deeper parts of my face and head, such as below the cheekbones, the temples, the bumps on the head, nose, chin, jawline/neck, and eye sockets. I also tried something below the eyes but ignore it for now. I proceeded with the eye makeup. With grey body paint on a thin brush, I sketched the shape I wanted the eyeshadow to happen with an angled brush and color from a black creamy pencil. I drew the outline and later filled it in with the same creamy pencil using a slightly thicker brush. I set the color with black matte eyeshadow. I decided I didn't want those grey shapes, so with a small brush and light grey I painted them over. Then with a thin angled brush and red mixed with brown body paint, I draw this shape that basically goes over the upper edge of the cheekbone prosthetic, thus masking the terrible edges I made. After I fill it in, I line my lower waterline with black. And with dark grey body paint, I cover the deeper parts of my ears to create more dimension. I take a sea sponge and black body paint and go around the grey areas, adding more texture and depth again with stippling motions. I also use some on the rest of my face quickly, tapping it with my fingers to make it look more natural. I cut another small sea sponge and dip it in white, using it to highlight some areas. With a brown pencil I go over the red marks, and to set it I use a reddish brown eyeshadow in an angled brush. With a small contouring brush and black eyeshadow, I basically contour my face in the same places I used black body paint. With a very thin flat brush and white body paint, I clean up wherever it seems necessary. I brought back the sea sponge with white to paint my lips, and with a thin brush I drew two short lines from the sides of my lips going downwards. I noticed this gave me more of a reptile look rather than an alien, but whatever. I also used some actual highlighter with my fingers whenever I wanted more of a shine. This way though, I lost some of the texture, but I didn't mind that much because it shines. Then I wanted to use a couple of tiny rhinestones, which I glued on the high points of the red marks and in the middle of my lips using lash glue. You can't really see them, but they are there. For the final look, I also glued on some long fake nails I painted black and red because fashion. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Huge thanks to my friend Kelly who helped with the videos and the pictures. You should know her very well by now, she has helped me too many times. I have her stuff in the description. Overall, I'd say this isn't an easy look. It takes a lot of time and practice, but hopefully I'll show you easier looks in the near future. Yeah, I had a bit too much fun at the photoshoot. Always, if you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram. I'll see you on the next one. Bye!